We're just beginning to catch our breaths after the previous flurry of major releases in the last couple of months, where we get the likes of The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, Final Fantasy XVI, Diablo 4, and Street Fighter 6, all in the space of a few weeks, to say nothing of the months preceding that period. But of course, 2023 is the year that keeps on giving, which means there's still plenty more to come. And as far as the immediate future is concerned, there are two games in the pipeline right now that are sucking up almost all the oxygen: Starfield and Baldur's Gate 3. Two massive RPGs, both highly anticipated for years, both coming from developers that are the absolute best at what they do. The hype is palpable in the lead up to both launches, and given the fact that both of them are promising to deliver huge, choice-driven RPG experiences, it's only natural to draw comparisons between the two, even if the style of gameplay is going to be radically different in both games. But if you were indeed to draw comparisons, which of the two games would come out on top? Not only in terms of how well they do and how popular they prove to be, but also in terms of how effectively they succeed in delivering on their promises. The strengths that both games are touting have excited audiences to no end, with Starfield, Bethesda Game Studios is promising its biggest game ever, which, for a studio that has built its reputation over the decades on building some of the most gargantuan games you'll ever see, it's a lofty ambition, to say the least. Up until now, we've seen what Bethesda RPG's formula brings with its fantasy setting and in a post-apocalyptic setting. But now that the formula is boldly going where no BGS game has gone before and heading into the vast expanses of space, the possibilities of expanding look to be endless. On top of having that emergent player-driven RPG experience that the studio has always been associated with, Starfield is adding everything from space travel to over 1,000 planets for players to explore, and that's an incredibly exciting prospect. Baldur's Gate 3 is taking a different approach. Just like Starfield, it's going to build on the successful formula that Larian Studios has established with its previous games. But that formula, of course, is less action RPG and more Dungeons & Dragons. Choice and consequence mechanics have been a thing in games for as long as anyone can remember, but there's almost no other genre that consistently implements them as well as this specific category of role-playing games. And in this particular category, right now, there is no one better in the industry than Larian. Of course, which of the two games resonates more strongly with you will depend on what you're looking for. If it's a huge open-world experience with a reactive world made of interlocking systems and mechanics, Starfield is looking like it's going to be the ultimate experience. If, however, you want your reactivity to be more tied to a branching story and experience the joy of watching the world and its characters react and respond to your actions in unpredictable ways, it's going to be hard to look past Baldur's Gate 3. What makes this head-to-head matchup particularly interesting is that both games are coming from studios who have immense legacies. Bethesda Game Studios is, of course, much more enduring, having delivered genre-defining experiences in the open-world RPG space for pretty much as long as the studio's been around. Across the Elder Scrolls and Fallout, BGS has time and time again set the standards and single-handedly defined genre conventions, delivering numerous titles that, to this day, rank as some of the best the industry has ever seen. Admittedly, the last decade has seen the developer's stock taking a little bit of a dip, but it's not the type of dip that you'd associate with the likes of, say, BioWare or Blizzard Entertainment. Yes, Fallout 76 was a disaster at launch, but it wasn't made by the main BGS team that's working on Starfield. And at this point, it's also now a significantly better game that's actually easy to recommend to fans of the genre and franchise. Yes, Fallout 4 wasn't at the same level as something like Skyrim, but even though it was a game with its fair share of issues, it was still a legitimately good RPG in its own right. Does BGF has a history of overpromising? Yeah, it certainly does. But this is also a studio that has a history of delivering some of the greatest games ever made. And there's every reason to believe, based on what we've seen of it until now, which is quite a lot, that Starfield could be another notch in that illustrious belt. On the other hand, the trajectory of Larian Studios' reputation is almost a reversal of what Bethesda Game Studios is. The studio has been around for at least 3 decades now, but for the majority of that period, it was a fairly obscure name that the masses weren't very familiar with. For a significant period of time, Larian's games used to be decent enough, but they were never remarkable by any means, and it wasn't until 2014 that the studio's rise well and truly began. Of course, from that point onward, the rise was a rapid and meteoric one. To say the very least, almost overnight, Larian became the new kings of the subgenre, becoming earmarked as their heir to the throne that was once held by BioWare There's obviously little doubt that Bethesda games have the far wider appeal. They're much more approachable and much less intimidating even to those who might not be too familiar with the ins and outs of the genres, which in turn means that where sales are concerned, the competition between the two games might not necessarily be too close, even in spite of all the significant unit sales that Starfield will be sacrificing due to there being no PlayStation version. Pretty much every major BGS release tends to sell dozens of millions of copies. Hell, Skyrim currently stands at over 60 million units sold worldwide, and it's hard to imagine a world where Baldur's Gate 3 does those numbers. There's little doubt, however, that in absolute terms, Baldur's Gate 3 will be massively successful, and will continue that steep upward trajectory that Larian's Graph has enjoyed in recent years. Even in its early access period alone, it's safe to assume that Larian is headed for yet another commercial success story.
Abomination, this is your end.
Your head throbs and your skin tingles. Visions rush past. A dragon's wing, a silver sword, and a flash of your face.
At the end of the day, it's nothing but good news for gaming that both of these games are coming out in such close proximity to each other. Getting to play even one of the games that can legitimately stake claim to the genre's throne is rare enough as it is, but getting two of them together, that almost never happens. And yet, this is the year where that's happened multiple times already, and may very well be happening again. That fans of RPGs are going to be able to dive into two potential behemoths of the genre in the coming weeks is, to say the least, incredibly exciting. Hey, did you know that we at GamingBolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.